Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, earlier today I had the privilege of participating in a discussion that involved the Department of Labor. And in summary, I felt the highlight of that discussion was the anticipation of additional federal funds, monies that would get into the hands of working men and women who needed it the most, those whose work schedules were compromised, whether it was the hours or they were laid off. And this is great news, Mr. Chairman. I think it lends itself to supporting the governor's proposal in terms of an anticipated increase. These benefits I'm speaking specifically about are related to the federal pandemic unemployment compensation program. Somewhere in the ballpark of $924 million was approved by Congress, $509 is authorized for release, $321 million released thus far. And I need to make this statement, Mr. Chairman, for the record, because, and forgive me if I'm wrong, someone could correct me, but I believe that there's, it's safe to say that 10% of those monies find its way directly into the tax base. They go right into, our cash flow and collection of those monies. But my point would be that as large of an infusion of capital as that may be into the economy, it's the same point I made earlier today and the same point I made in Committee of the Whole, and the same point I made on August 11th, that all of this is temporary, as it should be, until such time we revive our private sector. And so my question is related to this, Mr. Chairman. I had to set the context to underscore the fragility of this economy, especially, again, as I mentioned, in PCOR 1 and in a protracted lockdown where there's just no business activity, at least not enough to hit the projections as I think they're proposing. So my question is this to anybody on the panel. Would the administration be open to a supplemental budget, assuming that all the economic indicators and the projections set forth in her proposal are met along the way? Tied to this, of course, may even be the governor's need to transfer funds to meet the requirements stipulated in her veto message. And the reason why I asked that question is I'm going back to FY12, Mr. Chairman. I'm just as I'm listening to my colleagues, I'm going back in history and trying to pick pieces from the past that kind of fit this situation. And we saw that through the decades, ebbs and flows in the economy that was related to labor, employment, etc. And that's important because that affects the tax base. While they're considering and preparing to answer the question of a supplemental budget, I want to discourage my colleagues from making appropriations against a fund source that may not have the revenues to implement those appropriations. Those were the sentiments of then Governor Eddie Baza-Calvo in FY12. I also want to remind my colleagues that the administration has gone on to record to say that we are not in a cash crisis. I think the record of August 11 would reflect that, but I believe we are. And I believe we are because when you look at the revenues in GRT and withholding taxes since March, if you didn't think we were in a cash crisis then with those double-digit reductions, controlling again for the federal infusion of cash, I really believe we're going to be in a cash crisis, Mr. Chairman. And so the point would be the danger of over-projecting on these revenues would leave us with liabilities that we can't meet down the road. And so again, I'd like to restate my question for the record, Mr. Chairman. Would the administration be open to a supplemental budget, period? Would they be open to that? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.